The traditional formula for a monster movie is split into two halves. The first part is dedicated to building the world and suspense around the monster before revealing it, and the second part is dedicated to the action and horror which follow after the veil of mystery around the monster is finally lifted. And it's massively important to stitch the two together in the reveal, which is arguably the most important scene in any of these films, even more important than the ending. You can spend all your time hyping up the big baddie, but if the initial impression doesn't land or sets false expectations for the rest of the movie, then you've just ruined the entire rest of your film. Luckily, films today seem to largely understand the importance of the reveal, but even so, a lot of the potential is often lost. The reveal can easily become sensationalized or Hollywood at the expense of genuine tension or story. But the reveal is something that the first monsterverse movie, Gareth Edwards' Godzilla, does amazingly well. In fact, Godzilla's Hawaii sequence is probably one of the best executed monster reveals of the decade because of how difficult it must have been to pull off. In order to succeed, the sequence relies on an inherent understanding that Godzilla is not a normal movie monster and thus can't be treated as such. It's not enough to simply have him mysteriously emerge on the background or jump scare the characters. Godzilla is not Alien or Jaws, which have their own agendas and which can engage in direct face-to-face conflict with the characters. Rather, he's the size of a skyscraper, a force of nature for whom the humans running around are equivalent to ants or mosquitoes, which is a setup that could easily make the film boring. It's something that the sequels seem to be especially afraid of, with numerous scenes like these, where they try to root Godzilla to the same level as the humans, as a character and collaborator rather than a beast. But Edwards' Godzilla has the patience to introduce Godzilla in the way that he deserves, not as a character, but as a force of nature, with a meticulous focus on the unique qualities of Godzilla that threaten us and make this rendition of the monster so amazing. After an hour of build-up, Godzilla finally makes his entrance in the Hawaii sequence, which begins with a tsunami. It's been pointed out 1,000 times online how absurd it is that the little splash that Godzilla makes at the end of the film is basically incomparable to the tsunami that he causes when he first emerges. But the dramatic value of the tsunami can't be understated. It's not just a vanity addition there to tell us that Godzilla is big. It's there to tell us that he's so big that his mere presence is an immediate cause for intense havoc and destruction. He's a force of nature. Even without any malicious intent, Godzilla's simple presence in a human environment is enough to level entire cities and cause numerous casualties. To us, he is gargantuan, insurmountable. When we see him, it's not a cue to fight, it's a cue to run as fast as you can. This is an effect that Edwards exemplifies by always rooting the camera in a human perspective, not just in this sequence, but in the entire rest of the film. We never see Godzilla from unrealistic angles like we do in later installments, but from the streets and rooftops. The reason being that the second the camera is elevated to a higher perspective, the humans disappear. We really do become ants, and the film becomes simply about the big lizard. The effects of Edwards' decision to keep the camera grounded are undeniable. The difference between Godzilla and its sequel is as stark as the difference between Pacific Rim, where Guillermo del Toro employed a similar approach, and Pacific Rim 2, which nobody really bothered to watch. Whereas the first one feels both visceral and emotionally genuine, the second one just feels like a typical monster action smash, which is fine. I enjoyed Godzilla vs. Kong. But what Edwards achieves with Godzilla could have only been achieved one way. Edwards' Godzilla is more real, so it's paramount that the way he's shot must also be real. The threat that he poses to the typical human is not shooting him with a laser or eating him, but accidentally stepping on him, because that's how small we are in comparison. And that's the realization that Edwards conclusively drives home at the end of the Hawaii sequence with this very short but incredibly impactful moment. Listen to the panic shouting and how it disappears in an instant as the humans finally notice Godzilla. It's a moment that perfectly encapsulates Godzilla's appeal as a movie monster, as well as the threat that he poses in this movie. Even if he's not the enemy, in comparison to him, we are ants, small and insignificant. It's a moment of realization that conflict with Godzilla isn't about outsmarting or overpowering him. In an open match, we don't stand a chance. Facing Godzilla is purely about survival. That's the point that the reveal in Godzilla has to drive home if it wishes to succeed in its second half. That this won't be an action film or a horror film, but a survival film, which is an understanding that can be seen on the face of every observer who, instead of running, merely stare in paralyzing fear and wonder. For all its shortcomings, the reveal is something that Godzilla does perfectly.